but and in theory you can use a caching proxy. But in my case, I cheat. I dump big files like games, for instance. I'll download third devs, the latest ones, throw them in a file, and I'll dump them in the app cache early on in the process, and then if I need them later, they'll get installed as part of the script. And the main thing is my script goes through and installs all kinds of workarounds for bugs, and I ran to install some of the custom scripts. A lot of my work is with Dance Guardian, the content filter, because I got kids out there keeping on porn sites. The internet is evil after all. So the thing is that that Dance Guardian was an ugly app and it doesn't have much in the way of front end tools, so I had to hack something together in bash scripts. So
depending on what you're doing with it, there's a distribution called ClearOS that has a full front end for Dance Guardian.
Well, my premise, my clients are primary standalone home desktop systems.
Okay, so you
stupid router or modem dial-up.
Okay, so you can't throw a gateway of any kind.
Not really. I can't really plan on the environment much. Other than my own.
That's a shame because it makes life really
Yeah, I know.
easy.
Well, the same thing as online users, their user accounts, even if they share machines, I have to manually sync those. So user IDs have to be set. But usually it's only 3 or 4 machines, they don't change much. So it's a bot. Just yell.
Oh, sorry. You mentioned Intel graphics driver difficulty, and where I work, we do a lot of thin client deployments through Pixie booting, and the Intel graphics machines. We're using Ubuntu. We were on 10.04, and I'm trying to play with 12.04 to try and see what LTSP would be like on it. But I was kind of wondering, if you're already saying that there's some sort of Intel graphics trouble.
Well, the problem with the Intel graphics is like a lot of things. First of all, it's about Intel engineers are working on the XOR drivers for the Intel XOR driver. Thing is, they're old chips. They don't make money off those. They don't want to spend a lot of time on it. On top of that, supposedly there's no documentation supply. In addition, each chips have bugs, design flaws, and each step in a chip may have different bugs, so they have to precisely identify from the driver which chip they're dealing with and figure out which workarounds apply, because if they apply the wrong ones, it's going to randomly lock. I got lucky on Lucid in my Toshiba laptop with an 855 GME. It just happened to function, where previously it didn't work, and I had sort of working some hacks in Karmic to the point where I didn't want to update it. But before that, it hadn't worked since Gutsy. I mean, as soon as I hit any animation flash or any 3D, it froze up. Like,
I had an 815 drive chipset on a system with one update of XOR. Suddenly that chipset no longer worked. And the driver was part of the 915 series, but when I went and I said, hey, you got a regression, they're like, that chip is old, we're not touching it.
Yeah. Well, I know they supposedly banned a whole bunch of stuff. Like I had Banshee and old 3DFX cards laying around that had various bugs. I couldn't redeploy them, and then suddenly they decided that they're going to ban them. And honestly, it's hard to blame them. I mean, it's so much development work to keep track of that stuff. On top of that, they have to have access to the hardware. And then after all that, it's like, they really want to spend the time on that when they got people screaming to have the latest GeForce working? And it's a hard call.
Would you be able to recommend like a cheap PCI graphics that could maybe be put into thin client machines that would have maybe optimal drivers?
PCI, I would throw it out and get something with PCIe at least.
Well, I'm talking about
GeForce 210.
sort of like refashioned machines essentially that are donated from other sources and then used again into, and so they really are probably still going to have PCI slots, but maybe the Intel graphics that's not going to boot XOR.
The oldest ATI brand ATI card you can get your hands on for PCI usually is going to do really good for you. Radeon 800 or 8000, Radeon 9000. Usually going to get good results even if you don't load their custom driver. I don't know how many people still ship those new, probably not many, but if you can find a lot of them somewhere, grab them.
Well, my problem is that I get a lot of these e-machines and Dells. They're much newer, but to save $1, they didn't bother stuff in the AGB connector. But then again, AGB cards cost 50% more than the modern PCI, especially the same graphics performance.
Well, I know NVIDIA is not that as unpopular, but GeForce 210 is a very nice card, passively cool. It'll fit in a half-height slot.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really
and it'll actually do full hardware decode of H.264.
Does that require an extra power?
No.
Well, the other The other thing is, since I'm talking about thin clients, they don't really need to be super graphically powerful. I'm talking about just moving it straight to free RDP and just doing a terminal session on a Windows server. So
Yeah, it really depends on how much what your bandwidth and resolution is, and I think it's mostly 2D over like we use like X2Go or something. Or?
well, I'm looking into maybe trying to see if free RDP can play with like remote effects and some other enhancements. And because right now we're on really old packages of 10.04 LTSP, and so I'm curious to see what bugs and different features and things have been added, because we froze our packages in our repo just to make sure that we weren't going to end up with some sort of inconsistency down the road. But now we're at that point. The new LTS is coming, so we're just kind of like
good for a year.
Yeah.
Theory. My problems haven't been in the main repos. It's been like I was relying on PPAs a little too much, and you can't really count on people to maintain them. And so all of a sudden, my Lucid packages start disappearing. Yeah. Next time I'm going to start locally caching those. But yeah, if you're on a PCI bus, it's a pain, especially when you got something, it's like an 845 chipset. Okay, obviously it's not going to work with the DAM. On top of that, there's no HTTP connector because they want to save it off. And it's like, do I really want to go through the trouble of trying to get that working? Scrounging out a PCI card, which the bus bandwidth is horrible to begin with, or just throwing it out. I mean, you go down to the recycling store, you can easily get warm parts, old motherboards with HDD ports on. I mean, they're not going to be any better or worse, but the main thing is at least you put something usable. I do deal with the recycling store, so we run these situations all the time. And just the RAM, it's like you want to spend 50% more on the RAM for this board, it just costs the board, the power supply, and buy cheaper RAM.
This brings up an interesting question for me, which is if the Raspberry Pi is as awesome as everyone says it is, are people going to be switching to that for these kind of like thin?
The performance is there. I don't see why not. I mean, for one thing, new hardware versus old, power efficiency matters. Not to mention just physical space. I mean, if you can slap if you don't need a whole lot of external peripherals, if you get away with a Bluetooth mouse and maybe a